the greater Everglades ecosystem looked like originally simulated, of course. But the water would flow from Lake Okeechobee unimpeded, primarily south into Florida Bay, and it would exit at other points along the way, putting fresh water into the bays. So creating estuaries, charging the aquifer, providing habitat all the way down into Florida Bay. So it's a huge ecosystem called the watershed. And over the course of the years, when people started settling in this area, for flood protection reasons, that water would begin to be diverted. So instead of, Lake Okeechobee seasonally flooding, we would divert water out to the sides. And instead of a very gradual freshwater, expelling into the bays, it was a single point of fresh water expelling into the bays. So changing over the course of time that ecosystem. Another thing that makes Everglades National Park unique among almost all other national parks, at least as far as I'm aware, is that it's the only one that sits precariously close to a major urban area. So we've got this 1.6 million acres park, but we've got probably 7 million people living here in Miami. And of course on the West Coast as well, where you guys live. So a lot of demand is put on this ecosystem, taking its resources every day. So that's something I like to think about, something I hope that you guys would think about. So I guess you could say over the last 100 years or so, man has come into this area. We've changed the way that it historically functioned. We've plumbed it, we've dried it out, we've diked it, we've canaled it, we've severed its arteries, essentially. And now we're in a process to repair some of that damage. You guys have heard a little bit about Everglades restoration?
I don't think they, have you guys gotten any of that?
No.
No.
Okay.
Not this
well,
case.
this is sort of like the brief history of Everglades restoration in a nutshell. I'm certainly not a guru on it. But I will tell you that Everglades restoration is the largest wetland restoration in the history of the planet. There is no restoration project that's ever been attempted that's as large as the one that we're undergoing right now. Did you guys take Taniami Trail when you were on your way here?
No, we didn't. We went across Alligator Alley.
Okay. Well, so as you can see, this water's flowing south, and we've got roads that are built across the way so we can travel back and forth. And so they impede that natural flow of water. So we have one project that's been done on Taniami Trail, Southwest 8th Street, which has a huge canal that's built alongside it to protect from water, contain the water for agricultural interests and for us, prevent flooding, and all that stuff. But as part of Everglades restoration, we have now a bridge, 1 mile long, that allows water to flow underneath it. And that project was started about 25 years ago, and it was finished about a year ago.
Nice.
And I don't know how many millions of dollars it costs, but a lot. And so it's just one example I wanted to mention of successful restoration. And I didn't really think I'd start talking about that right away, but I kind of just did. So I guess before I go any further, I want to just make sure I also touch upon some of the other things that hint upon the specialness and uniqueness of this place. So Everglades National Park is at 1.6 million acres. We are an international biosphere reserve, as well as, of course, a national park. We're a wetland of international significance. We are a World Heritage Site. So around the world, we're considered as unique and important as the some World Heritage Sites. Pyramids in Egypt are probably World Heritage Sites.
Yosemite National Park.
Yosemite. So unique and rare and special for all the people of the world, this place right here. And wilderness. So of that 1.6 million acres, I think probably about 1.3 million is either already designated wilderness or in the process of being evaluated for wilderness designation. That's really, really important because that gives it an extra level of protection in terms of its uses. So we're really excited about that. This is the 50th anniversary of the Wilderness Act. So we're very excited that the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Wilderness, which is right here in this park, is part of that. So it's a big thing for us. So it's funny. You're driving along the main park road. The park itself is not wilderness. This trail is not wilderness because it's disturbed area. But if you walk off the road, I think it's about 40 feet, you're in wilderness. So we have wilderness a few miles away from one of the largest major metropolitan areas in the United States.
What does that mean, wilderness?
That is such an interesting question. I was going to ask you guys that, actually. Have you ever even thought about wilderness?
Completely wild and natural.
Wild and natural, okay. Anybody else?
Untouched by humans.
Untouched by humans. That's what I always think about. What about you guys? Anybody from this side? Wilderness? No. It seems easy, right? But it's a broad concept. What I think the National Park Service means by wilderness is maybe different from what wilderness really is. Untrammeled by man, right? Is kind of a universal theme of wilderness. We have archaeological evidence that shows that there have been people living in this wilderness for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. I'm not an archaeologist. I don't really know the timeline, but we know that the Calusa Indians, the Tequesta Indians, the Seminole Indians, and the Miccosukee Indians all used this land. Used it a lot. I mean, they helped to form it. They built shell islands. They burned prairies. There's evidence of this, for their hunting. So we know that they used it. So if wilderness really means untrammeled, then there is really no wilderness, but there has to be wilderness, right? So I think what we're trying to do as part of wilderness is to restore the area to what we think it was like at a certain time in history. I don't know. Interesting, right? I always thought that was kind of interesting. But it is really, really important to the Everglades and to people to have a place where we can go to experience wilderness. It's one of the reasons why the parks were developed was for the well-being of people, to have a place to go. So it's important. So we are here, and sort of, I guess, this ecosystem here is so unique because of where we're located. We're at the very northern end of the tropical latitudes. We're at the very southern end of the temperate climates. So here in South Florida, we have this melding of the temperate and tropic. So you see things that you don't see anywhere else in the country. You see here in South Florida in the Everglades. And that's one of the reasons why people started coming here and finding all these things. So a tree called Gumbo Limbo that's got this peeling bark. It's got birds and animals that just people had never seen until they started exploring this area, so they became fascinated with it. I had another point I wanted to make, but it left my brain. Anything else that you wanted to cover before
I was going to say, do you mind if I use that and kind of give them an overview again?
Absolutely.
Okay, so guys, so you can see this as she pointed out. You see all of this right here, okay? That was the historic flow of water. Has anyone been on the south side of Lake Okeechobee?
Miami?
Yes.
Yeah.
It has a huge, basically dike. Oh, sure. has a huge dike on the south side. Have you guys seen it? It's like 40, 50 foot tall.
We stood on and top of it.
Yeah, it's huge, isn't it? So that's actually created because what happened, you got that? What happened is this happened every single year. Well, people started moving down here and they thought, oh, it's such a great environment, we can grow all these crops, and so they started planting things. Well, almost every year, or if it wasn't every year, it's every 2 or 3 or 4 years, you would get this huge flood from Lake Okeechobee, and all the farmers were saying, hey, what's going on here? We have to do something about this. And we've had a shift in our attitude, because back in the 40s, 50s and stuff, it was like, we are going to control the environment. And so we started digging these canals, building dikes, and we were channeling the water where we wanted it to go. And it allowed us to farm, and it helped protect people. People's houses weren't getting flooded, and everything seemed great, right? Well, after a few decades of this going on, we realized, one, man cannot control the environment. You know, Mother Nature always wins in the end, okay? Because hurricanes can still cause Lake Okeechobee to flood, and still flooding occurs in those areas. So ultimately, we didn't control Mother Nature. Also, all that diking and canaling didn't allow the water to flow through the Everglades into Florida Bay, which is the area just south between here and the Keys. So this whole area, which is a very important, huge estuary right here. You have 10,000 islands, a place where you have the American crocodile. You have a lot of different species that go there to actually breed, and it acts as a giant nursery, if you will, for a lot of marine species. But we were blocking the flow. Instead of just flowing like that, as Ranger Julie mentioned, now we just had a couple canals that were cut across this landscape. And so it was drying out some of the other areas, so we were losing habitat, and actually the health of the environment was going down. And eventually it was actually worse off for the farmers, and we still didn't completely get rid of flooding. So on the back side here, whoop, there we go, the wind. Okay, so you can see, this is great, both of us, we're like big and white. So Orlando's up in this area, right? So this starts up here. You can see this is just the swampy area. Actually, Disney World was built in a swampy area. But everywhere from there down was basically a swamp. And so we built canals all the way from there all the way down here. And in between up here and Lake Okeechobee is the Kissimmee River. I don't know if anyone's ever been on it, but the Kissimmee River currently has its canals and locks. So a lock is one of those things to where if you're in a boat and you want to travel upriver, you have to go into this thing, they close the gate behind you, pump water in, it elevates you, and then they open it up, and then you go to the next lock, and you do that, and there's a series of locks moving up the river. Well, the Kissimmee River Restoration Project is still underway. It's almost complete. It's one of the largest, it's part of the overall Everglades restoration, but it's the largest thing they've ever done with the river. And as a class, in the past, we actually helped them do studies looking at the biodiversity on a restored portion of the Kissimmee River and a portion that was all canals. And we counted 3, 4, 5 times the number of bird species on the restored part of the river than we did the canal part of the river. And so they were restoring it because as the water would come down here, rivers don't naturally just contain 100% of the water. During the rainy season, if you get a tropical storm, hurricane, guess what? They flood their banks, but that flooding re-nourishes the land around them. But if you build these really deep canals, these dikes on the sides, the land off to the sides doesn't get nourished occasionally, so it actually, the nutrient quality goes down, and then the water is just diked away. And so this is what it looks like here. You see all these canals? That's the current day, and we're trying to restore it here. Good? So the Tamiami Trail that Ranger Julie was talking about literally act as an impedance to that. And I know many of you guys were sleeping as we were driving from, driving into Miami area, but there in Broward County, on the left-hand side of the road, there's a huge dike. Just this wall of dirt. On the other side, you saw all this sawgrass, you saw standing water, and then on this side, you had Alligator Alley. And then on this side, you had all these homes that were built. Historically, the water was flowing through that sawgrass and just kept on going all the way through here. But now we have all these canals right here. And So we're just trying to gradually restore it. Good?
I'd like to add one more thing.
Oh yeah, please do.
So historically, as that water was flowing down into Florida Bay, it was also going down into the earth. So we've got this limestone bedrock, which is the foundation that we're all built on, and underneath that is our aquifer. So at the same time that this water is flowing south, it's also going down into the ground, and that's where we get all our drinking water. So it's important not only for the habitats and for the ecosystem restoration, but also for all of us that live in this area. Okay, let's walk.
You want to go walk?
Let's
Okay,
do it.
excellent.
I've got some materials for you too. I don't have for everyone, but you can take them back with you.
Okay.
I've got some park maps.
Excellent.